call the meeting to order.
Okay.
Because we will have an item, hopefully to set for an action item, which will be after the presentation. I would like for the board to make a motion and to set the public hearing for June 1st for the LDO.
Okay. All right.
Just so you're aware, I would like to do a roll call, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was going to ask Robin if you were there and if you mind go ahead and do a roll call. I think everybody's present except for Sheila, if I look around the table there. But yeah, do a roll call, and after the roll call, I'll turn it over to you, Julie, to proceed.
Robin, I am not seeing that we are broadcasting.
Okay, it's showing live on YouTube. Let me double check.
That just popped up. Got it.
Okay, this will be a roll call for the Board of Commissioner members. And if you would just respond that you are present after I call your name. Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Vilga.
Present.
Commissioner Sneed.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Medley.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Looks like we got quorum, I believe. Do you agree?
Yes,
we
sir,
want-
we do. And I'll
wanna
make
do a
note of
roll-
the planning board members that are present.
I was on note. You want to do planning board members too then?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got one latent person that is now joining the meeting.
Hey, Robin, this is Donnie Lawrence. I'm not getting any sound on my computer, neither is Frank Pierce, so I just dialed in on the bridge.
Okay, that would be Donnie that was joining. So Shelley, would you mind doing the roll call, or Chairman Powers for the planning board?
Okay. Let me.
That's
make sure
obviously
I've
not
got one.
Shelley with a deep voice.
Yeah.
I am here and available if you would like.
If you have the list readily available.
Sure, absolutely. I'll go ahead and do the roll call for the planning board then. Important to note, Mr. Davian Cross did email in and say he would not be available today. Mr. Powers, are you with us today?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, are you with us today?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce, are you with us today?
He's video only at this time. He'll be on audio shortly.
I do see him, and I will take a screenshot to acknowledge his presence is here today. And I do not believe the remaining of the board is here and giving a visual, but I will ask regardless. Mr. Moss, are you with us today? Mr. Schwartz, are you with us today? Ms. Pryor, are you with us today? Hearing no response from any, that gives us 3 from the planning board here today.
As this is a special called meeting for the Board of Commissioners, the planning board is invited to attend, but they do not need to be counted towards quorum.
Okay, Julie, thank you. It's all yours now.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So today we are wrapping up a discussion that we had started on April 22nd. We had a joint workshop with the planning board. We continued the presentation with the planning board at their meeting last week on the 26th of April at their regularly scheduled planning board meeting. And so we have incorporated their discussion points into the PowerPoint presentation for you today. So what we will be doing is continuing that presentation from April 22nd. We will be asking you to keep a couple things in mind. One is the expectations of your duties today. We are here to receive information and to begin discussions on some of these last topics, give guidance to staff on what you would like incorporated into the final draft of the UDO. The final draft will be available May 12th. And we would like to have you make a motion at the end of the meeting today to schedule the public hearing for the June 1st regularly scheduled meeting before the Board of Commissioners. And when we get to next steps at the end of the slide presentation, we'll tell you where we're going with these meetings, but just to keep in the back of your mind, we do have a final deadline of July 1st to have a final draft of the LDO approved and effective that is 160D compliant. That is our main goal at this point, is to get 160D compliant. Any discussion points that we don't come to a consensus today on, we will table until after July 1st. So we'll move forward either with what we have in the current UDO or what we have proposed for text now, and then circle back on July 1 and come back to the topics that we need to either rehash or involve the public a little bit more, or have more workshops and discussions amongst the board members on what they would like to do to give staff direction so we can get these final text amendments done. So if we are not coming to a consensus quickly on these last topics, I suggest that we just give guidance to staff on what you would like to see to move forward for the next couple of months until we can circle back around after July 1st. So keeping that in mind, that this is a living document, we will be having text amendments moving forward. We just need to be 160D compliant by July 1st. So that is our main push. Our meeting schedules for the next couple of meetings, we have a planning board meeting scheduled to discuss the final draft on May 17th. May 18th, you have a work session to discuss the final draft. May 24th, the planning board will wrap up the discussions on the final draft. And then June 1st, as long as you schedule that public hearing tonight, we will have the public hearing on June 1st to hopefully approve the final draft at that meeting to be effective July 1st, giving staff time to get the final documents in place, printed, distributed, and on the website so that we have them ready to go for developers on July 1. So with that, those are the expectations of today. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and let him start with the PowerPoint presentation. I know James is here as well from Kimley Horn. I believe Kelly and James will be tag teaming some of these topics, and we'll give you time at the end to make sure that any questions that you have are fully answered or answered to the best of our abilities at this time. So Kelly, if you'd like to start.
Thanks, Julie. And Mayor, as always, it's a pleasure to be back before you. We will be there face to face in very short order, which will be even better, so that we can always just be able to catch up, talk through the code, and kind of continue to move forward in an expeditious manner. As Julie said, we've got a pretty good list of topics that we need to cover today. And there are a couple things that, yes, we definitely absolutely need guidance on, or the input, or kind of the head nod, I'll call it. And there's a couple things that, if we do, like Julie said, have more discussion, or there's still some consternation, then we will, like I said, put those over in the parking lot. So from the continuation that we had almost 2 weeks ago, tonight, or today, we're going to be talking about the cluster subdivision standards. And Julie, were you able to pass out that white paper that we sent you up a little earlier this morning?
We're going to wait till after the meeting to distribute it. That way you can introduce the paper as part of your presentation.
Got it. Okay. So we've got some additional information that'll help explain some of the cluster subdivision components. Of course, we also have the trees preservation, greenways, construction, trailers, all the way through to and incorporating portions of the open space discussion. Go ahead, Julie. So there again, we made some really good headway from the 26th, and Julie's provided that information to us. And so we've been making, I'll say, some minor adjustments on the fly with that. But, and you can see on the screen here, the planning board provided the following comments talking about greenways, sidewalks, and the construction trailers. I'll say probably one of the biggest things that you'll start to see in here, especially from the planning board, is with respect to, like I said, the sidewalks. I know that's been a discussion by this body for some time, sidewalks on both sides, location and things like that. And they did provide some their recommendations as it relates to sidewalks. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in today's presentation. And then again, a big topic that came up back on the 22nd was with respect to construction trailers. So Julie. The other items that we had received input from the planning board on dealt with street buffers. They were basically identifying that no trees need to be provided between the curb and the sidewalk, that only to start looking at the grass strips only, and the trees should be behind the sidewalk. Now that does start to create an interesting discussion about where does the right-of-way start? Do we get into some of the easement discussions? But one of the concerns that we typically hear is, that street trees are great, especially when they're first installed, but as they start to mature, we start to have issues either starting to break up the sidewalk and creating some accessibility issues. So that's one of the reasons that discussion came up at that point. Telecommunication towers, I know there's some certain limitations. I know I saw Mr. Neal's on here today, so he can also weigh in on this one. And of course, food trucks. And there was a lot of discussion a couple of weeks ago as it related to the food trucks. And so there again, we will talk about those today, including some comparisons with some of the other communities. One of the things that we did since then is to actually try to go back and just confirm a couple of things, especially, are we being too restrictive compared to some of your neighbors? Are we being overly permissive, or are we kind of in that Goldilocks, which is, just that right component? And the one thing I will definitely tell you at the end of the day is, regardless of what Wake County is doing, what Morrisville is doing, what Clayton is doing, or any of the other communities, as Kelly Arnold said early on, this LDO needs to be Rolesvillian. So, we try to make sure that we're identifying that, and it's not a cut and paste or carbon copy of other communities. Ready, Julie? So the major topics. So let's start off with the clusters. The steering committee had identified about approximately 40% open space within a cluster subdivision. And the feedback that we received as part of the joint workshop was this seemed very high. And then more importantly, what do some of the other communities do around the state? So what we did is we started looking at Wake County actually says, well, it's 10% open space in the urbanized areas, 25% in non-urban. Kannapolis goes with a straight 30%. Clayton actually gets a little interesting with a 12.5% open space. So when we start looking and talking about that, one of the things that you'll see within the white paper is we start to identify kind of the differences between conventional subdivisions as well as cluster subdivisions and some other general components, including a few additional examples, including some example projects that are within Metro Raleigh and or Metro Charlotte. So we can kind of walk and talk through that. And we've got a couple of slides that will also start to identify that. So this is some of the excerpts from the white paper, and the white paper is, it's probably 3 to 4 pages. And what we've tried to do is to break it down into some of the most simplest terms. So the image on your left is a traditional or conventional subdivision where there is no open space. We basically are using straight zoning. So if in the case of a low density residential, all the lots are the exact same size, we don't have to consider or take into consideration open space requirements. And there's a specific set of standards, including setbacks. In a cluster subdivision, I know this is a little bit more abrupt appearance, but basically what we're doing is taking the same number of units and putting those into a smaller space. And what is left over is still usable if it's open agricultural uses, if it is green space, if it's native habitat, if it's whatever, those areas are still set aside. One of the things that we were very clear on in our standards were that, once we start talking about the clusters, we're not taking away density. We're not taking away development rights. We're just allowing development to actually be concentrated in an area which is a little bit more economical for the community as well as the developer. And at the same time, you're achieving open space, which is something that the town and staff have said we want to try to preserve where we can. And the biggest thing about this is clusters are optional. Nothing says that thou shalt do a cluster. You have the ability to do it, or you have the ability to go in as a conventional subdivision. Julie's going to go to the next slide and you'll see a couple of the examples that we provided. So the first image that you see is an example of a cluster that's 22 acres, total of 40 lots. So there again, we're talking about a relatively consistent type of density with the low density residential, the RL district that we're proposing for the town. And typical lot sizes in this are averaging anywhere between 10 to 12,000 square feet. This actually resulted in about 43% open space, which you can see in the bottom, I'll say right-hand portion within the red outline. So the entire red was the parent tract. The blue highlighted area, of course, are the lots. And that remaining habitat area, those tree preservation areas, are set aside at that point. Now, same number of units that could be built under this, there again, could be 40 based off of the current zoning. The lot sizes are a little bit larger, of course, at that point, and then the developer would have to be required to install additional infrastructure, roads, water, wastewater, and things of that nature. So there again, this kind of gives you a quick idea of that was about 40% open space. This one is a little more consistent with that one example that we showed you last time, kind of that rural one, which was this is 52 acres, 25 lots. So there again, about it's actually 2 acres per unit. We got a math flip, James, with a typical lot size of about an acre with 50% open space. So there again, the developer in this case had the ability to go in and do the 25 lots and utilize the entire site, or they could concentrate the development on the front portion where it was a lot more economical, especially when you start looking at some of the topography and whether or not when they installed the sewer lines, that they had to do a lot more infrastructure like lift stations, which is basically almost like a pumping station for the water or the wastewater. This one shows up to be about 50% open space. So, at the end of the day, what we're talking about, and we'll make sure that you've got this, is, it's an optional form of development. It's only applicable in the low density and the medium density. The low density actually gives you the ability to do a certain percentage of open space. And right now, based off of the steering committee there, again, it's set at 40%. That is definitely subject to what does the town want to be with that. And there again, the density is exactly the same. So it is still a 2 dwelling units per acre. It does allow you to do smaller lots, and we've actually modified that to be a little bit more consistent. And it does get into the 40% open space. Under the residential medium, that RM district, that's the area that if somebody wanted to do the cluster, they could actually get a potential density bonus. Not yet, Julie, just one more second. And there again, that kind of gets into some of the density discussion. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is, there again, optional, not reducing density, actually, in the case of the RM, enhancing it. And that white paper will hopefully explain some of these concepts a little bit more. Julie, do we want to take some time to just see if there's any specific questions, or do we want to kind of keep moving?
I'd like to keep moving. As the board knows, they're more than welcome to interject at any time to ask their questions. Since we have a limited amount of time today, I'd like to keep moving, and then just as always, have the board feel free to chime in when they need something.
Sounds
I
great.
did have one question on this real quick.
Mhm.
I know this will be based on the whole outline here, and with that neighborhood kind of shifted to the left, is there any way for them to, in the future, split that piece of property off and sell it off and just get around the open space altogether and develop the other side?
That would actually, it's a great question. The way we've set it up, and James, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually start identifying conservation easements that go in play with that. So they couldn't just go in and automatically do it without going back before the board.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Very good question. Okay, Julie, do we want to move to open space? And this one's actually going to be James.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. For the record, James Ehrman, Kimley Horn Associates. Happy to be here today with everyone. So based off of the last call, we did have some input from the board and the discussion on open space. So based on the feedback we received, the 10% seemed appropriate for the residential low and the residential medium density. But there was some thought about upping that open space requirement for the more dense residential high density. So we did think that increasing that open space allotment to 15% was appropriate. So as you can see here on the board on the screen, we've made some of those updates so far. Just to kind of remind everyone, when we talk about open space, we're talking about some of those passive or functional open spaces as well for these subdivisions. So we've made some of those initial tweaks in the code, and you'll see that moving forward in the next draft. And I think we can go ahead and move to the next one, Julia, if there's no further input on that. There was kind of a small tweak that we definitely heard from the last call. So the next action item we wanted to talk about today was really tree preservation standards. And there was a lot of input and a lot of discussion on the last call about this. And one of the things we wanted to do was definitely kind of hone in on the fact that tree preservation is very different for every community that we've seen. And what we've done is include some of these examples up on the screen. So we did look to Rolesville, which they have a very complex tree preservation system ranging from anywhere from 19% all the way up to 41% of trees on site. And they really do link back to tree coverage and tree canopy requirements. So it is a pretty unique code in that. And that's definitely one flavor of that type of tree preservation approach. Durham is a little bit more of a traditional approach that we've seen throughout the state. And they kind of hone in on the fact that their requirements start to kick in on developments greater than 2 acres. So it saves some of the smaller developments or some of those quote unquote mom and pop type developments from some of these requirements, and really starts to kind of hone in from that small to medium to large type developments. And where they settle in on their percentages is actually preserving 20% for residential and 10% for non-residential sites. So they have that size distinction, and they also have some of that differentiation for the uses on the development. So that was definitely another flavor we wanted to throw out just to kind of show you an example of how that approach works. Wake County, we also did look at, and they have another different example, and this is actually a tree protection zone. So they don't really get too much into percentages as much as they do saying 50 feet from the right of way into your property and 25 feet from the property lines is really where we start to see no tree and vegetation can be disturbed or removed, and they really encourage the developers to maintain and have those as part of their existing buffers and as part of that development site. So there's a lot of different flavors, I would say, of what we've seen communities do. There's definitely not a one size fits all. It definitely does come back to community preference and what they want to achieve. Julie, we can go to the next slide because we have a couple more points here. So just to kind of throw out there, based off of the last call, we did say that 10% preservation was an appropriate number, especially looking at around the area, but we did like the inclusion of a size requirement for 2 acres or larger. So kind of requiring this for developments that come in that are 2 acres or larger for that. And it would be evergreen trees 20 inches, where before we were saying a 24-inch diameter breast height, and also making a distinction for the deciduous trees of 18 inches. And then making kind of that caveat saying within required buffering areas. So that would be within areas that are going to be buffers anyways for the site. That is where we would start to see those preservation of those trees in that size. The next kind of tier of that would be trees 60 inches for diameter breast height or greater would be preserved throughout the site. And those that measurement was a bit of a come down from the 75 inches based off of what we heard on the last call. And kind of just looking out about throughout development plans that we've seen come through, 75 is a very, very large tree. Typically, you don't see anything greater than that for sure. The 60 inches start to be also very, very large trees in themselves. Ones that we see a lot of communities protect and kind of make that size distinction there. So there is some possibilities here for the provisions of what we've talked about for tree preservation, and wanted to come back with that.
James, just to make sure I understand what you're saying there. So let's say you got a 3 or 4 acre site and you got a 60, 75 inch tree right in the middle of that site. Then they have to build around that tree and leave that tree in the middle?
The tree would be a protected tree, but there are provisions to do things such as, relocation. is a possibility. And really, this is something I think that we can look towards the board for further input if they really want to retain those trees. We've seen codes say you have to design around that tree, but we've also seen codes take an approach of, if you need to tear it down for some reason, we can have some sort of credit approach or some sort of provisions for a payment in lieu for future tree development and approval there for that. So it is something that this is flexible. This is not anything that is set in stone entirely, as it was kind of an item that we had left open-ended based off of the last call. So this is definitely a discussion point.
So I think I'm confused, maybe not quite understanding. So the way it's written right now, it is preserved, but you said that we could possibly add something. Okay.
Yeah, and that's correct, Commissioner. Yep.
Go back to that last slide of what Raleigh does. If you back up one slide, tree protection zone of 50 feet from right of way and 25 feet from property lines. That as a developer, that appeals to me because of what Ronnie said. You got trees in the center and you can't move them, even preserving, 10 or 20% of the trees, you've got to establish where those trees are, because one tree could ruin a whole 2 or 3 acre deal or bigger deal if it's in the center. Now, I like what Wake County is doing because it's preserving the trees around the perimeter. And I'd like to have your thoughts on that.
Okay, so if the trees are, if there's a piece of land and there aren't many trees around the perimeter, but there are some in the very middle, those that are the huge ones, the 60, what did you call it, breast diameter or what have you, are going to be taken out. Yeah. So I liked what he said about the option of them having to something in lieu of, so that we could have money paid to us to replace those, because those are old trees if they're that wide around. So I think that something needs to be done instead of them just wiped out if they're that big.
Yeah, I think that your best bet, we always get stuck with this in lieu stuff. I think your best bet is saying, if it's this size tree, you need to replace it with X amount of trees on the property. Like, just kind of a handoff. And that way you can show proof that, hey, this is a great tree, we got rid of it and everything else, but in place of it, we put, 5 trees over here or 10 trees over here of a certain type.
Or width of diameter.
Yep. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
I agree with that. I'd hate to see them just wiped out and, nothing, being done to replace it.
Exactly. Yep.
And this is Kelly. That's actually a fairly common approach. We definitely don't want to go. And I know some of the discussion was, thou shalt not touch any of the trees. However, like was mentioned, there may be a tree right in the middle of a 2-acre site, and it's pretty much the only place that you can do your development. So yeah, you can absolutely, as a town, say, okay, for those trees that are removed, you have to replant X number of trees, and or like you were saying, a certain diameter above and beyond the normal amount of trees that you're required already. So there's a couple of options that, to definitely consider. And I think that's consistent with what we're kind of hearing.
Yeah, thanks for that addition, Kelly. I think that's a great point. And it seems like maybe that's the direction that we're trending in. And I think that's, very appropriate. And we've seen a lot of codes and communities have very good success with that. And it does add some kind of, teeth and strength to those without being too overburdensome. So I think that's a good line to straddle.
Good, very good comments.
Yeah. Well, if there's no further comments on that, I think we have a good direction to kind of go forward with for that final draft, and we can make those revisions. So thank you today for that. All right, food trucks. And Julie, you can feel free to jump in at any point on this one. I know there's been a whole lot of discussion on this, but I can tee it off. I know after last discussion, there was definitely a whole lot of talk about food trucks in general and what is the best way to permit those and what does the community want to see moving forward. After the last planning board meeting, the input really that was received on that was a tiered approach was very much preferred. Kind of making a distinction between 3 different categories of a 24-hour permit for a food truck, a 1 location permit, so it kind of locks them into one place, and then also a multiple location permit, which would allow them to travel between different sites throughout the town. Each one of those would have a different fee and kind of a different review process depending on the complexity and the amount of sites and whatnot. But that would be something that I believe, Julie, you guys would need to kind of to hash out in that fee schedule and whatnot and deciding what is most appropriate for that. And then there were still some baseline standards that we're proposing in there, things like 100 feet from the main entrance to a restaurant, and then still allowing for special events where we could have some clustering of food trucks for that. So I know that was definitely a big discussion point on the last call. And Julie, if there's anything I missed, feel free to jump in on that as well.
No, I think that pretty much just is where we are. We had the planning board basically hash this out, and they did come up with, I think the consensus was to do the tiered approach. They liked the idea of a permit and they liked the idea of a fee, but they liked the idea of having a different fee and a different level of permit based on whether you had a 24-hour permit for like a what we'd call a one-off, if you're just doing a one-type event that's not necessarily tied to any special event, that would be part of the special event permits. A 1 location permit that was good for a year and a multiple location permit that would also be good for a year. So you could base it off of where those locations are, and some of those stipulations that we have in the ordinance now would still carry over. You would still need to provide your license and registrations. You would still have to provide your health certificates. You would still have to provide your health permits, that kind of thing that we would be checking. And then also you would have to still provide some sort of site plan so we could make sure the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens is taken care of. And then we would also need some sort of owner signature saying that you can be on the property. So you could have multiple food trucks on a certain address. That you could have, multiple food trucks having permits for one address location for that year. However, each food truck would have to have registered that the owner is allowing them on the property. So that is currently how we do things. So we would carry that provision over. So the planning board did like having the different fee for each permit tier. Some of the stuff we talked about was how much time is involved in reviewing a permit. If you're reviewing a 1-hour permit, a 24-hour permit, or a 1 location permit, it's the same review process. But to make the 24-hour permit a little bit more attractive or a little bit easier to secure, especially since it's only for 24 hours, we talked about the fee structure of being maybe $50, $100, and $150 for the different tiers. So the first tier, 24-hour permit, being around $50, that would recover some of, but not all of the staff time that would go with researching and securing those permits. The 1 location for 1 year permit being the $100, that would cover staff time. And then the multiple location permit, again, because multiple locations have to go through the same process, but you don't necessarily need to recheck the VIN and the health permit and all that, the license and registration every time. You do still have to review site plans, and you still have to review owner information, that type of thing. So putting a little bit more cost to that, but not as what the fee structure would be as if you were getting multiple permits for multiple locations and being charged full price for each location. So that is where we landed with the planning board. So the only other option really on the table is to leave it as it is and come back and visit it after July 1. And then the option after that is to just do nothing and allow permits, allow no permits, no fees, and just allow the food trucks wherever they want to go. What I'm hearing from the board, from the planning board, what I heard from you last time on April 22nd was that you did want a permit, you did want a fee, but you wanted to make it more fair across the board. So that's where we came up with the tiered approach.
Julie, I like this, and I suggest we go with this.
Great.
Okay,
I do have a question. Go ahead,
Actually,
Michelle.
I wanted to know if Mr. Pierce had a question because he brought up something at the planning board meeting last week. Anything, Mr. Pierce? Did you want to discuss it any further?
I don't think his sound was working there for a little bit, Michelle.
All right, so his concern.
Hello.
Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, this is Frank Pierce. No, I can live with this. My concern was somebody trying to have a birthday party, and you know, as I do, that the food truck will be there sometimes no longer than 12 hours, and to charge them a high figure just doesn't make any sense. So I can live with this.
Yeah, I think so, Julie. I kind of hear last time you was talking about it costs a lot to do a permit, especially, you got to make sure the owner signs off and all that kind of stuff and make sure it's not within 100 feet of a restaurant. But if someone's having a birthday party at their own house, looks like to me it would be a very minimum need to do much of that stuff, just be more or less administrative office personnel right now to permit, if it's on private property, like a private landowner or private home. So are these permits like the one location or 24 hours, are they cheaper than what we're talking about? Or at all the same price?
Yeah, that's the tiered fee that would go with it. The 1 hour, the 24-hour permit would be the lowest price. The one location permit for 1 year would be a medium price. And then the multiple location permit for 1 year would be a higher price than the one location. So we were thinking 50, 100, and 150. That way there's a tier to it that recovers some of staff time, not all of staff time, but does cover some of staff time, and also gives the food truck an opportunity to make their money without dipping into their profits for the cost of the permit fee.
You know what? I don't think we discussed how many is multiple. And if there's another location, if they have a multiple location permit and then they want to add a location, is that an additional fee? I just don't recall us discussing it, but we may have, and I missed it.
A multiple location permit would be any location they wanted to add to the permit besides the initial one. So if they're going to have a multiple location permit, it's the $150, and they can come back and do an amendment and add a third, fourth, eighth location. But they would have to have each of those listed on the actual multiple location permit, so we know that they've got permission to be there with that property owner.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, Julie. The one location permit or multiple location permit, which have you, is there a number of food trucks? Is there a limit that is not? My concern is a food truck rodeo in the parking lot of the post office every Saturday. And that would be a concern, just picking a place. That would be a concern that I have, that they started congregating in one place. So is there a limit to the number that can be in one place at one time without it being a special event?
Currently, we do not have a limit, and we have not discussed adding a limit. We can discuss adding a limit, but currently we do not have a limit. If you have a permit, if it's a multi-day permit, at this point, the permits are good for 1 year. You can go on that location for up to a year. And that's why we need the owner's permission for that location to make sure that the owner is okay with them parking on that property. But we do not have currently a limit on how many can be at one time.
Does anybody else think that that could become a problem, or you don't think that's going to be a problem?
I don't think that's a problem. I think we'll be okay with that one. My suggestion on the multiple location permit is we should probably have a set amount of locations. Say, I don't know, Rolesville's not huge right now. Say you have 4 locations right now. That's your max. And then once you want to add anything other than more than 4, like a $25 fee, because you're still going to have to check out all that paperwork and everything else. I mean, I worry that somebody's going to come in and overload the system, just picking a bunch of places that they want to, just in case they might want to set up there. I feel like 4 would be kind of a, that would give them enough spots, I think, in town. And after that, 25 after that for each one.
I haven't checked with her.
I agree with Paul.
All right.
And are these prices comparable to other places, Julie, that are charging?
Yeah, other places that are charging for permits are charging anywhere between $100, $150. And they're for one location and for 1 year. So they are comparable to our sister communities.
Hey, Julie, this is Kelly. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On special events, will this allow the event coordinator or provider apply for a permit on behalf of the food trucks?
Special events are not changing. Special events have a different permit process. So this is for anything not tied to a special event. Anything with a special event follows a special event permit format that the town already has in place.
Right. Okay. So the answer is yes.
Correct.
It sounds like, right. So if the town has an event or somebody else does, the applicant can come in on behalf of the food trucks.
Right, with the special event permit.
And they have 4 trucks as part of their event. They pay 4 different permits associated with that, or
No,
is it?
It is under the special event permit. They don't need an extra food truck permit if they're under the special event permit.
So they could have a food truck rodeo event
Mm-hmm.
and have as many food trucks as they can.
Under the special event permit, yes.
And that I don't know what the price of that event permit is, but it's gonna be a lot less than a food truck.
Then each food truck trying to secure their own permit for a 24-hour location, yes.
Yeah.
It falls underneath the special event permit from the town, yep.
Yeah. Okay. I may want to reach into our special event permit and review that a little bit. But okay, it doesn't. You're going to go ahead and allow as many, and then if we need to modify our special event permit, we may look at that way.
Yeah, we're not proposing any changes to the special event permit process at this time.
Yeah, Kelly, I kind of like that because it'd be a nightmare for the event coordinator to try to do anything different than that.
Mm-hmm.
And also it allows for any place like I guess swim club, neighborhoods, associations, churches. As long as they got a special use permit, then they don't have to get into all those details of trying to get every vendor to get a permit.
I'm sorry, so can you clarify that, Julie? Because that was my question. If an HOA is having a food truck rodeo, so is it the HOA that's who would be applying for the permit? Or would it be each individual food truck that would like to participate?
If somebody is applying for a special event permit, so it's a town permit for a special event.
No, I'm not talking about town. I'm talking about an HOA.
That's where I'm giving you the clarifier. Okay, so an HOA who wants to have a couple of food trucks that is not coming in as a special event, they have to secure food truck permits under the regular food truck permit process. If somebody like the farmers at the farmers market, which has a special event permit from the town, wants to bring in a food truck as part of that farmers market under this special event permit, that food truck does not have to get a 24-hour permit or a 1-year permit for that special event, because the special event permit allows that food truck to be on site.
Okay, so I'm still not clear on they with the HOA. Is they the HOA, or is they the food truck vendors?
They is the whoever holds the special event permit.
Okay,
So if the HOA gets a special event permit, a food truck vendor does not need to have an individual food truck permit. It is under this special event permit. If it is an HOA sanctioned, block party, and they're having something, but it is not under a special event permit, and they just want to have a couple of food trucks come, each food truck has to have an individual permit.
okay, so then that's the question I was really asking.
Right.
That's the one. That's what I need the clarification on.
That's right.
So when a neighborhood is having their event, I would say the villages, and I'm not saying they do or do not, like I did last time. If they want to invite 5 different trucks, we're having this pool opening party and we're allowing 5. Those vendors, it's up to them to get their permit.
Correct.
To be, okay.
Yes, those vendors should have a town issued permit to vendor food from their food truck. So any food truck that operates within town should have some sort of permit, whether it's the special event permit that they're umbrellaed under, or their individual permit, whether it's 24 hours or a 1-year permit. They will need to be permitted in some way to operate in the town limits.
I guess you just threw me a little bit when you had said it earlier, if the HOA is doing a special event. Because that still would be a special event. They're just inviting food trucks.
It is a special event permit from the
Right.
town, not just you can't just call it a special event.
Right.
There
and
is a permit process from the town that is called a special event permit. And if they secure that from the town, that permit allows a food truck as part of that permit. But if it is just an event, but not a special event permitted by the town, then that food truck still needs a permit to operate.
Okay, that was the answer to my original question. Thank you.
And Julian, we're getting way off topic, I think. So I'm just one thing to think about, and then we'll round it back in and you get back on topic. But I was thinking we was encouraging everybody to do special use permits if it caused traffic problems, that kind of thing. Because if you get two special event things going on at the same time, we've had difficulty with that. So we don't have to talk about it today, but I'm thinking if they're causing traffic issues, they're supposed to get special event permits.
Yeah, a special event permit is under the town code. It is not under the LDO. So we are not proposing, as part of the LDO rewrite, any changes to the town code. Special event permits are under Chapter 113 in the town code. So special event permits are a separate process by the town, not necessarily the planning department. So this is the separation, so that we are not suggesting any changes as part of the LDO to the town code for special events. And if that is something, as Kelly said, he wants to look at separately later, that is something that needs to be done separately from the LDO process, because that is a text amendment to the actual town code and not to the LDO. Clear as mud?
Yeah, I think so.
Reading my code book now, but go ahead.
So what I'm hearing is that you like the tiered approach, you like the 24-hour one location and multiple permit location. You would like to add a stipulation that you can have up to a maximum of 4 locations for that one tiered price, and that we will have a tiered fee as well for those permits. And that we may be looking at the special event permit process in the town code as a separate process from the LDO updates. And so if we're comfortable with that, we can call this good and move on. Going once, twice sold. Okay, we're moving.
All good.
Julie, this is Michael. Can I ask a clarifying question too? We had a call just a couple of weeks ago from a neighbor or a resident wanting to just invite a food truck to the house in the cul-de-sac for, it's not a special event. It's just a bunch of neighbors just want to have a food truck there for half the day.
After July 1, that's a 24-hour permit for $50.
And they can park in the public street.
Yes.
Okay.
As long as it is safe. We have to make sure that, if it's on a 26-foot back-to-back curb and gutter sidewalk and they only leave 10 feet of space for a car to get around, then no. That'll be part of the site plan review to make sure that traffic is not going to be hindered on a street. But it would be a 24-hour permit for the $50 fee.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. It's sold. We're moving on.
All right. Way to go, Julie. Nicely done. Excuse me. I know this has been a couple of discussion points that we've had along the way. And this was one of the reasons that we actually proposed modifying the current non-residential development standards. As Julie's got on there, this is definitely something that the Board of Commissioners needs to weigh in on, especially when we start talking about some of the changes. Right now, your current masonry ordinance is section 9.14 of your UDO and incorporates all of 4 individual standards, and that's dealing with the exterior. And that just gets into that all materials, colors, and architectural details shall be consistent and compatible. It gets into facades, and this is probably the one that we want to kind of talk about, facade colors, and then the multiple storefronts. Currently, your masonry ordinance requires the 75% brick or stone where it is visible from a public road, public or private road, or excuse me, public, existing or proposed. We've actually identified a few changes to that, actually making it a little bit easier to kind of work through, because we felt 75% was probably a little high. So we were actually talking about considerations for a lower amount, not by a great deal by any means, but 70% or some other smaller number, especially where we're talking, because we now have the transparency standards. We're also talking about some of the accent standards and components. So we definitely wanted to get the board's discussion and input as to what do they want to see. And I know that there's been, like I said, quite a bit of discussion. So if we can, Julie, let's just kind of see what the board has to say.
Okay, I'm the one that brought this up because I was on the board, and Ronnie also, many years ago, when we were concerned about the downtown area where the fire department is. And we decided we wanted all brick down there. But some way it got changed where it goes beyond the downtown district. And we put in a dialysis clinic. And we were told that it had to be 100% brick, all brick. And that was what I thought we were dealing with. Now, with this change, the facade visible from the right-of-way, 75% brick, I like that because it allows the builder to put something else in there besides brick to accent it and make it a prettier building. I have nothing against the kidney dialysis clinic, but I feel like it's a bland building because it is all brick. I would like to see the recommended changes saying that the facade that's visible from the street should be 65, 75% brick, brick and stone, brick or stone or whatever, and then we can accent it with hardy plank or something else to jazz it up some. And the part, the back of the building, or if it's up against some trees or there's nothing behind it, maybe there's residential that you just don't see from the road. I see nothing wrong with that being metal or whatever the developer or builder chooses. So that's what I'm going after. And so from the right of way, I think that's good. I like that language, and I like this recommended change.
And Commissioner, just for clarification, just so that the board is also aware, when we propose the town center district, it actually requires a minimum 60%. And then also gets into exactly those things that you're talking about. One other
Okay.
thing that we also want to make sure we're very clear on is, we're talking about, the primary facades where it's visible from those existing or proposed public roads and right of ways. In the situation that you're talking about where it's adjacent to residential, we actually have a fairly significant landscape buffer that will also help with the screening of those areas.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I'm in agreement with this. I'd like to know if the other commissioners are in agreement with this.
Yeah, I'm okay. I think that's kind of what we had gone to, Jackie, anyway.
All right,
Maybe
should we match the 60% that they're using for downtown, or should we leave it at 75?
I think if you match it, it's more consistent throughout the town.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah,
I was thinking
I
the same
agree.
thing. I think
Yeah.
60%. Okay, great. All right, thank you.
One question about the neutral earth tone colors. Does that mean, for example, you wouldn't have a sheets type building or sheets way they would develop their building if we had one in town?
Good question, Ronnie.
One of the things, Mayor, what I would suggest that we do, and we can provide you a couple of different locations that have developed sheets with similar types of these standards. The speed tracks, the larger, including the 7-Elevens, have a palette that they can meet with the earth tones. So there are communities out there, and the sheets and the 7-Elevens and those are actually prospering using the earth tones. Yeah, you still get the accent components. So you still know it's a sheet, you still have the signage, they're going to have those accent colors to help you kind of recognize that.
Yeah, and I do know
Okay, so
the only issue I have is if you drive through Cary, sometimes it is ultra bland through certain sections because it is all earth tone, it is all brick. It doesn't look very good. And I know why they did it, but I agree. I think we should just step it down a little bit.
I think make an exception because I was just in Nightdale last weekend and I didn't even recognize the dollar store because everything going straight down the block, it was all earth tone. So, and it was kind of funny because when I went in there thinking it was one store, well, that doesn't matter, but it just like when you don't see what their, what is it? Their, not their logo, but their brand, sometimes it is hard to distinguish and it does become flat and boring. So can an exception be made to such a store like Sheets or any other store that has a very like CVS, they all have certain colors? Can exceptions be made for that, or is that opening up a can of worms?
Yeah, I think what what happens is, I guess if you don't have any standards, then it does look pretty cluttery after everyone has their, you have a green store right beside an orange store, and so I think you need something. So you feel like these companies are still using their logos and able to use their symbols, and I mean it's not all neutral and earth colors. What you're talking about, is it?
You're absolutely correct, Mayor.
Right.
And like I said, what we can do is after this meeting, I will do some Google Street Views of different of those larger, I'll call it the formula-based businesses like that, so that you can see how they've kind of integrated either their color schemes or the accents and things like that into these types of design standards.
Right.
Is this something that we could apply to the 60%, just to make it easy? That the 60% brick or stone has to be the natural earth tone colors, and then the rest of it, the accents could be whatever need to be for the company logos or company colors, or however they want to jazz that up. But to keep it even across the board with that 60%, the brick or stone features have to be that natural earth tone colors, and then the other 40% could be those accent elements.
I like that idea. That's good. Or we could say neutral earth tone colors preferred. Others have to be approved by the you have to have approval for other colors. But I like Julie's suggestion best. Anybody else agree with me?
I just
Yeah,
want
I
to,
agree.
I hear what you're saying. I like that idea, but I do want to see other how these companies are matching, their brands with neutral colors.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
about the sheets on Perry Creek and 401. Isn't the building kind of beige, but they still have their sheets logos, which just, so we're able to distinguish that it's a sheet.
That's right.
So is it mostly that the building itself is the neutral colors?
Yeah,
Is that
yes, ma'am, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to make sure and be very clear. We're not advocating or requiring that somebody's trademark or copyrighted logo has to conform, because there's actually there's some court cases on that.
Mhm.
But yeah, we're talking about the physical building itself. We're not talking about their logos, their color schemes, and things like that.
So it's not going to be all bland colors. Then
Correct.
It'll be some accents and things.
Mhm.
What you're proposing.
Yes, sir.
So really, it's natural earth tone colors with logo or branded accents, I guess you call it.
Yeah,
and brick and stone?
Yeah, absolutely. And we like I said, we work with a lot of the national retailers, and we've actually been part of, not me personally, actually I have on a couple, been part of their overall design playbook for colors and color palettes that they use for various locations. So they all have some level of that for the most part, and they get very creative.
Yeah. I think one of the experiences we have, Jackie may remember this, is the now defunct Walmart. I think they called it Walmart Minis or Walmart Expresses. I think
Walmart Express. That's right, Ronnie.
They don't have them anymore, but they had a design they used, and some accents and some design things in our code require a landed brick building, which they struggle with, in trying to make it work, if I recall.
Yes.
So, I think what we're looking for is a happy medium, that it's not, somebody won't come in with something in our face that we'll have complaints about, but something sort of like what April described, the sheets that to me I don't think sheets stand out too bad, but I could see where if they use all their color 100% of the time, it would be very noticeable, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely, Mayor. What we'll do there again is we'll provide a couple of alternatives so you can kind of visualize and see what we're talking about, especially on these national chains.
Yeah, and I think most national chains now, if you look at what they're building new today, they're somewhat matching neighborhoods and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So they're not like they used to be. They're not like the strip the strip drive you see in some towns when you went into, both sides of the road, just cluttered with businesses that none of them matched anything,
Very much so. Yes, sir. Anything else on this topic? Yeah, and just kind of, I'll say the last kind of parting shot on this one. For those of you that fly out of Raleigh-Durham International, the sheets that's close to the airport, they actually incorporate the brick facade around the building, and they use the awnings, the roof lines and things like that with the red accent. And then of course they've got their logos and their signage there, so you can definitely tell it's a sheets. And that one's actually very well designed in our opinion. We ready to go on, Julie? Yep, already there.
All right, great. Thanks, Kelly. No, a lot of good points there. So I think we have pretty good direction on those small tweaks moving forward. So that's great. As another item, we just didn't really get to it on the last discussion, but greenways, we did want to point out that we do have some standards built into the code for greenways to make sure it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, as well as Parks and Recreation Master Plan. One of the items we did hear back, and Julie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it came from Parks and Recreation themselves saying that the requirement right now in the text is for a 50-foot dedication of an easement for that. But we did think it was smart based off of some conversation and input from them that we could downgrade that to a 30-foot requirement if there's some sort of topographic or environmental issues on site. So we are going to make that small tweak based off of that input from them. And we did just want to highlight a few of the other greenway items here that really we don't want to mismatch or kind of mix up greenways and sidewalks. They are going to be two distinctive things moving forward throughout the LDO. We're going to make sure things are ADA compliant for those designs. And really, it's going to also be consistent with the landscaping buffering standards that we've set up elsewhere in the LDO as well.
Couple questions. So the sidewalks and the greenways, so you won't be able to use a sidewalk as a connection in the future. Is that what you're saying? It has to be a continuous greenway type thing.
Yeah, unless there's some topographic variance that is needed because of contours or some sort of environmental issue. We're trying to keep the sidewalks and the greenways separated from each other. If there's a design alternative that needs to be designed because of some sort of environmental feature, that we can issue a variance for that, or we can issue some sort of design alternative, but the general standard will be a greenway is a greenway and a sidewalk is a sidewalk.
Good. And who was presenting that? Was that you, James?
Yes. Yep.
So, you know, one of the problems we've had in the past, one neighborhood would develop and they would bring the greenway and tie it into the sidewalk before the property end, maybe 50 feet before the property end. And then the next development right beside it would build their greenway same way up to about 50 foot to their property line and tie it to the sidewalk. So, you know, what we need to make sure is it kind of almost deads in like a road that has to continue rather than tying them into their sidewalks. And you have to, to leave one neighborhood to the other, you got to go to a sidewalk to go to the other neighborhood. And I think that's interrupted to our greenways,
You know what? I can't picture what you're talking about. Does Carlton Point have that situation going on right now?
No, they haven't been constructed yet, but those ones up north, up Avery Road, that's the way they were built or where they were designed. They haven't put them in yet, Michelle, but in other words, the greenways from one subdivision don't directly tie to the greenway in another subdivision.
Okay.
It's really a mess.
Wow.
So you said they haven't been built yet, but that's the way it's designed. So
Yeah.
Once this comes so as of July 1st, that doesn't have to be changed because that's already set, or it does have to be changed?
No, it will not be changed. Anything that has development approval underneath the current UDO keeps their development approval.
Got it.
Anything new will have to come in underneath the new regulations, but anything that we've already approved and those preliminary plats, I believe part of the greenway is on a sidewalk in the preserve at Jones Dairy South. And so that subdivision, and that was a design constraint because there is some, I believe there was a design constraint. I don't remember exactly what it was, so I don't want to speak off the cuff and say something that is incorrect. But I do remember the greenway comes down through and doubles as the sidewalk. They made the sidewalk, instead of 5 feet, the sidewalk is 10 feet, so that you know that it's a larger pathway, but it is still it doubles as a sidewalk and a greenway. And moving forward, we will be doing sidewalks and greenways unless there is a design constraint that really makes that impossible. So there'll be a way to still make that connection if needed, but the preference would be sidewalks are sidewalks and greenways are greenways.
So who would give that?
Do you have a picture of that you can put up on the screen, you or Julie? And I'm talking about Kelly Klepper, by the way. Or Julie, is there like a picture or something? I just can't even envision it. Sorry.
Commissioner, if you
Yeah,
don't mind me multitasking while Julie and James start to keep talking, I will find one for us.
So
Okay.
Julie needs a variance. Who would they have to go to get the
The
variance?
variances go before the Board of Adjustment, sir.
Okay, so this would require Board of Adjustments to vary.
Any type of variance would need to prove a hardship on why
Okay.
they can't do what the LDO requires them to do.
Okay, so it's gonna fall under the variance standard then.
Yep.
If they use a sidewalk, that's good. One other question on the ADA, James, that includes slopes, or is slopes a ADA problem?
Well, that's a great question. And I think how we have some of those standards written, Julia, if my memory serves me correct, we have some kind of flexibility in terms of, if there's slopes or topographic concerns, that they can do things like, I know for the sidewalks, things like boardwalks can be introduced, or, some alternative forms to make sure that that connection still stays that way.
Mm-hmm.
But those things would be kind of have to be thought through during that design process for sure.
Yeah, I know some greenways even we have today, it would be hard for somebody in a wheelchair to wheel themselves up that greenway because the grade is so high, so big, so much, they couldn't do it. And if something happened, they would kill themselves if they, roll back down or something.
This is Kelly. I want to step in for a second, Mayor, if you don't mind, because we're getting into standards, and the first bullet isn't quite. It's somewhat accurate, but we're about ready to start our Greenway Master Plan, and that's what we're going to be working on. The consistency with is, and that's where you, Mayor, and the board will get into everything, including standards, and the question you raised, what is the ADA standards, will be in that, because that'll include the standards of how the greenways will be built. So that's gonna be the guide, and that effort is about ready to kick off. I think the first meeting is next week, and that includes the bike master plan update. So just want to remind us that we're about ready to start on really clarifying everything about greenways in one document in the next few months.
So in this document, only statement we're gonna have is just say it has to be ADA compliance without any adding anything other than that. Kelly, is that what you think?
Probably so. I don't think we want to get into specifications again, because I think we're going to be very specific.
I got you.
In the document that's we're about ready to embark on.
Understand.
Yeah, and those are great points. Thank you, Kelly, for that. And I think that's a great point, just to kind of say this really was intended to set up to make sure it's not going to contradict with that future plan coming through the town. So good points.
Yeah, and I like this too. I mean, I've never agreed that the sidewalks were greenways. We've always had that issue. It always seems like it comes up in every plan we look at. The only other issue I want to question was the hardship part. We will have some that was going to come through that say, I can't go over this greenway. I can't go over this, this certain area because of, water this or water that, I have to build a bridge. And I just want to make sure we keep in mind that, I don't feel like that's a hardship. That it should be a greenway, no matter what, if we can possibly do that.
Yep. If you can't put pavement down, Paul, you can put a boardwalk in.
Yeah. Right.
And I do think that, whatever we put in this LDO is up for consideration when we get into the real details of the Greenway Master Plan. And then when we get that done, we ought to adopt it and amend the LDO to acknowledge it. And then if there's anything inconsistent, change the LDO to acknowledge that also. So
yes, this is a placeholder.
I would call this an interim step.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is your guide, obviously we want to make sure that this is brought forward in this next generation of what we're trying to accomplish in greenways. But when we get in that discussion, we may come up with other things or be modifying this slightly as we talk about, because we're going to really get into the line drawing and such like that. And so that's really going to get into, Paul and Mayor's, your question is, where are these going to be built? How are they going to be built? And then if there is going to be any exceptions, hopefully that we try and reduce those in that master plan so that we don't have any exceptions when we get into the LDO development. So anyway.
Yeah. So if I
Mr.
can,
Mayor,
oh, go ahead, Dave.
before we move off this point, there are at least two ways we could address the question or the issue that Commissioner Bilga raised with regard to exceptions in the LDO outside of the standards. One is a basic variance idea where the basic questions from statute and common law would give to the Board of Adjustment the discretion to decide, is this a particular issue for this particular property that creates an unanticipated, unfair, unjust result for this property owner? In most cases, it will be a developer in our case. It won't have much more than that in terms of guidance for the Board of Adjustment. They are informed that the mere cost is not enough to get the variance. We have case law on that. So it's pretty broad in terms of your board members' discretion to apply sort of what we might call equity standards to those sort of petitions, okay? Another way we could go at it would be to try to identify the sort of challenges that you are already identifying in this conversation. For example, a stream crossing. Well, what do you do when there's a stream crossing? We could have an exception with some standards so that the staff could go to option B when a particular sort of reality occurs on the land. One matter that the staff has already discussed is that we have competing standards in our Greenway LDO that we're about to adopt. We're supposed to follow the slope, but also maintain ADA standard. That could come into conflict, and how does that get resolved? And that then goes to the standards that Manager Arnold is mentioning. But if you want to nail down certain variance issues now to guide the Board of Adjustment, don't hold back. Let's get that in there. The other way to go at it would be, let's see what happens. We certainly are going to be a lot better off than we've been in the past already. And if we end up with things going off the rails with the Board of Adjustment giving too many variances, we can revisit it then.
All right, so what I have on my screen right now is the approved construction drawings from the preliminary plats that were seen by the board. This is Preserve at Jones Dairy South. You've got the greenway coming through here, and it comes around the cul-de-sac and on the south side of the street, and then continues down here to get through the rest of the greenway corridor. This is the sidewalk for the cul-de-sac. So what they did was they came through the subdivision and then used the sidewalk from the cul-de-sac as the greenway to connect back down through. So that is what we're talking about when you double a greenway and a sidewalk on some of these site constraints where things happen and where we've allowed it to be doubled in the past. Moving forward, what they would have to do is they'd have to find an alternate route, whether this the greenway would come down here and be along the perimeter and then come down, and then the sidewalk would still be the sidewalk rather than having them double up and do both. So that's the difference, and that's what we're doing. What we're proposing moving forward is we keep this separation so that sidewalks are sidewalks and greenways are greenways. Is that a better visual?
Okay, so I think in Hampton Point, isn't that the situation in Hampton Point? Like it comes through, that greenway comes through two homes?
I'm not familiar with Hampton Point, I'm sorry.
I think that's where I saw something like that at, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
All right, okay, thank you.
You talking about the new one, Michelle, or?
No, the old one, and there's a pond back there. And I think there's like a little trail as well. And to get to it, you're cutting between two houses. Something was made between the two houses to get you back into that cul-de-sac. But I'm not exactly sure that cut through is taking you to a sidewalk. That part I can't remember. So, but that was a good visual. So anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I think we've got our marching orders there. If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to the next topic so we can wrap this up by 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
Going
thanks,
once,
Julie.
Yeah,
twice.
go ahead, James. Yep.
3 times sold. Sounds good.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julie. Well, we'll go ahead and jump into another kind of point of discussion for today. And this was something we heard previously on temporary sales construction trailers. So really, these are kind of those construction trailers you'll see on active construction sites. Often they're used as like an office space for some of the foremen or construction workers and whatnot for those development of the site. Really, the intent here in just adding some standards in the LDO is to really provide just some baseline standards of saying these really are meant to be only used for construction sites, or when actively engaged in loading or unloading of items, what if you're providing some type of emergency services, or if you're doing, like we said, the active construction site for an approved development or building. So we've added some baseline standards into the LDO to make sure that we're capturing some concerns about those and no issues moving forward for that. And I believe, Julie, the planning board kind of had a couple questions, clarifiers on that, of whether or not they wanted to add a number limit on site. And also just kind of a general question. I think they branched off a little bit, which it may be something that is an additional discussion item post July 1st, but we've seen this in other communities where they grapple or kind of wrestle with whether or not they want to use things like cargo container storage pods for sheds, or kind of storage space and whatnot throughout the community. And that's definitely something that every community has a different preference for. So I would say, what you see up top is some of the proposed language in the LDO, and towards the bottom, they're limiting numbers on site and the storage pods and cargo containers. Those are more questions we just wanted to pose today for everyone on the call to kind of discuss if anyone feels strongly on those. And Julia, if there's anything I missed on that, feel free to jump in.
Nope, I think you did a good job.
I think personally, being I'm somewhat familiar with the other side of the business. You got to have some storage containers, and especially things for your material, because it's going to get stolen if you don't. So they have to use a lot of boxes and stuff to store their things in. If it's under construction, I'm not sure. Are we getting complaints on that somehow, Julie?
Yes, currently we allow no construction trailers on site, and we have some developers who want to put a construction trailer on site to use as a model sales home, not a model sales home, but as a sales unit while they're constructing model homes. So they have an office on site while they're building the subdivision. And also we have some places that need temporary offices while they're constructing their buildings. So they need a place to house current operations during the project building timeframe, because they're going to be, without an office otherwise. So we're trying to make accommodations for people who have access to a site, but not a building on site, to let them have a temporary construction to either use as offices or to allow for daily activities on site while the buildings are being built on the property. We did have a limit tied to this. So within, I think we said 30 or 60 days. I can't remember, James, what we landed on, but it was a time frame after the CO is issued that the trailer has to be removed.
Julie, when we built Granite Falls Swimming Athletic Club 11 years ago, we had a construction trailer on site from day one. And we also had, after I'd say 4 months before opening, we had a double wide trailer for a sales office. And we landscaped it. And it was fine, and we never got a complaint about it. This needs to be thought through, because I think, just like Ronnie's saying, that they need a place to store stuff to keep stuff from being stolen, because that's a fact of life. We've had people go into our townhomes, the last ones we built, and steal the ceiling fans out of them at night. So you can imagine what they'll do to something sitting outside. This needs to be thought through.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with a construction trailer on site, and I don't have a problem with a trailer for office or to show or to encourage membership if it's that type of business, or show to serve as a model home to show renditions, as long as those last two are landscaped and look nice. Now the construction trailer, we didn't landscape around that. We just set it there, and we had it there during the construction of the building, and we got rid of it the day we got our CO. But this needs to be thought through before we started handcuffing builders.
Yeah, at the moment, we don't allow it at all.
I know we've had them. So when did we quit allowing them?
Well, I can't tell you why we've had them. I can tell you the current UDO does not allow them. They are only allowed in industrial zones.
So you don't think it's any out there today?
None that are permitted.
Okay,
none that are legal from the UDO.
That's a different question. Sure I was thinking Stonewater had one for sure, and that's one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. With the $800,000-$900,000 houses. But so who's anybody complaining about it, or because I guess being that we don't have it is why we're saying we don't want them to have it. Is that what's driving?
No, we're trying to make it so they can be allowed. We're trying to.
Mayor, if I may.
To allow.
Oh, we're trying to make it so it can be allowed.
Yes. Yes.
Or legally allowed.
That's right.
Yes.
I got it.
Part of this came from.
Confused me when you kept saying don't handcuff them, trying to unhandcuff them, basically.
Yeah. Okay. I follow.
All right. Go ahead, Kelly.
Oh no, part of this came from the town manager, because we're going to have some construction projects on town-owned land soon.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I found out, wait, what? So we're trying to make sure. She walked around that line saying who caused this a little bit disturbance. But yeah, we need a, I want to get it cleaned up so at least the town
will be compliant.
Town's compliant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I personally don't remember when we said we weren't going to allow them more, because like Jackie said, they've been allowed for years and years.
I think Julie said they weren't allowed, but who was enforcing it? So you have one builder or developer that comes in and did it before, and he comes in again and they do it again, and somebody else seeing it's being done and nothing's really being enforced. So that's probably why you all were surprised to hear that it wasn't supposed to be allowed. That's what
we may need to look at these bigger ones with the multi-phases, that they can't put it into one phase and leave it the whole time. And, you finished out that phase and people living there around it and all, that it probably need to be where this construction is going on. And I've seen that, I think, what's the one across from New Bethel Church?
Cedar Lakes?
Cedar Lakes. Yeah, they had one years ago when it first started up near the front, and it stayed there for 15 years while that thing was going on, probably. So, maybe if we're going to put some rules around it, it needs to somehow, they have to move it as they develop, somewhat, move it out of where people are living at, because I've seen that happen before. They put one in, landscape it, and it'll stay there the whole project. And if it's a big project, it could stay in a phase that's been finished for a long time.
I agree with Ronnie. I think we need to allow them, allow construction trailers as well as temporary trailers for membership type businesses, as well as new home sales, residential.
All right. Anybody else?
I'm trying to figure out, what do you mean, Jackie, memberships? You mean like?
Let's say CrossFit is going to build something right beside of me. that I'm not that crazy about, but it's only fair that y'all let me build mine. We're gonna let them build theirs. But they may want to set up a construction trailer. They may want to set up a trailer to get advanced memberships. So when they open the door on day one, they've got 200 members.
Okay.
So it gives them a chance to survive from the start. It helps them get off to a good start. It helped us get off to a good start. And we don't want to see any businesses fail.
Okay, so I have a question to that. So now you're talking 2 trailers on a site versus just one, making efficient use out of the one for memberships and for a day-to-day business.
Yes.
So now you're saying 2.
Yeah, I sure am. We had 2 on our site.
But yeah, you had 2, but the rule was you weren't supposed to have any. But are we saying now to have 2 or to just have the 1 trailer and they do their business out of that 1 trailer, which isn't impossible?
It's
unless
impossible.
the construction is strictly for material.
Yeah, your construction trailer usually is for the contractor meet with their subcontractors on a daily basis to see what's been done right, what's been run wrong, and how they have to change it. And they meet almost every morning before they go to work, and then they meet in the afternoon also. So you've got subcontractors running in and out of that trailer. You don't want a construction trailer and a sales trailer to be all in one.
Okay, so while I have no experience with that, let me just throw this at you. If you have a construction trailer up there with 2 doors, one for one side and one for business, that doesn't work either. Does that make sense?
Not when you're arguing with your subs.
Oh.
And also, when the Granite Falls trailer was there, they had a whole
I'm not arguing the point, Jackie. I'm really just asking.
Well,
yeah, I've been in some of those meetings.
April can speak to this because she was a part of it. April, would you speak?
Yeah, Michelle, when Granite Falls was there in the beginning, it was the office, the sales hub was a full-on office. You had somebody doing sales, somebody else.
You're frozen, April.
And that was a double wide trailer.
Aquatic, somebody else signing them up. There was a copy, was a full service office.
Okay, so again, I'm not saying no to it, I'm just asking, because then my next question would be, so just like you're saying memberships, so you are saying conducting business, so real estate sales. So you have somebody over here conducting their day-to-day sales, and you have another truck for material.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with 2 trailers being on site because it worked for me.
Okay, so if you have a large development coming in with multiple phases, so are we looking at 2? And again, I'm not objecting to it, but are we looking at 2 possible trailers during each phase?
No, I'm saying the same thing that Ronnie says once they're built up around that, move them to the next phase.
But you don't typically end one phase before you go into the next one. You segue into the next one.
Yes,
and again, I'm not
especially the sales trailer. I'm sorry, no, especially the construction trailer, because your construction trailer usually doesn't need water and sewer, quite frankly. They just need electricity. And our construction trailer didn't have anything but electricity.
Okay, not objecting, just wanted to get clarification because I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've got a consensus now, or mostly consensus, so we know what we're doing. You like the idea of allowing them, you like the idea of letting them move with the phases, and you like the idea of looking later at some of the storage containers, maybe as a permanent use for some of these storage materials for other things, and we can come back to that at a later date, but we've got enough to keep us moving. In the essence of time, we've got about 10 minutes left that we can dedicate to actual discussions. So I want to move on to street buffers. James or Kelly?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And I can jump in there, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, and this one's a pretty quick one, I think. We're not really proposing a lot of changes to what's currently required. Planning board had some input, just kind of clarifying language that trees won't necessarily be between curb and sidewalk. Really, they have to be behind the sidewalk. And Kelly alluded earlier in the call just to some of the concerns that we see from communities for, how those trees grow and affect the sidewalks and whatnot. So that's something that we're clarifying moving forward. And I don't really think there's a lot of high points to hit here, Julie. We just wanted to include that as a slide today.
Make sure everybody's comfortable before moving forward. So one.
Well, I do have a question about that as well.
Okay.
So with the trees, and I know the issue of going into the villages is one, and there's other neighborhoods, when the trees start outgrowing their space and they start buckling the sidewalks, especially in community neighborhoods, does that responsibility does fall on that community, right? That HOA or something? How does that work?
Commissioner, just for clarification, this is Kelly. We do provide a couple of things, including the tree wells and the root zones, those root protection areas, so that the potential impacts on the sidewalks are minimized. Because we see that all too often. The other thing that we've kind of looked to identify, and that's one of the reasons we're saying, put it behind at that point.
Okay, cool.
1, 2, 3. Moving on.
All right. Nope. Great question though. Yep. And then I think this is the final discussion slide we have, Julie, I think for today, and then we'll have some time to open things up for some conversation, which is great. But just one more item was the telecommunication tower. So these are things like cell towers, that we've seen a lot of communities deal with over the past 20, 30 years. Of those have been more and more commonplace. Really, the planning board input that we received back was really to allow these towers throughout districts through a special use permit. So that would be something that comes back before. I believe the Board of Commissioners is going to be reviewing special use permits, Julie, based upon our last call, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be something that comes through that process and has that extra level of review.
Yes. So if we're good with keeping, currently the towers are allowed in all districts. We had talked about reducing it. The planning board suggests keeping them in all districts as we move forward. And so we just wanted to make sure that the board is comfortable with keeping them as they currently are, allowed in all districts.
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we keep an eye on antenna placement, not just cell towers.
Yeah, so small cell wireless is a different category within the telecommunication towers. Small cell wireless is a different classification. So what we're talking about right now is just like the 200-foot monopole type towers.
Okay.
The small cell wireless is under different regulations.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Julie, what about rooftop installations and disguised installations?
Co-locations are in a different classification. This is just for the towers only. This
So
is just for the
freestanding towers only.
Yes.
And a co-location on a freestanding tower would not require a new special use permit?
Correct. If it is within a 10% modification, it does not require an amendment to a special use process. If it's above that, if the tower, if it's going to raise the height of the tower, or if the equipment is changing by more than 10%, it does have to come back through and get the special use permit amendment. And we do have a consultant that we use to meet those guidelines on whether or not that 10% is being met with the equipment change out.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, that is it. So I'm going to skip this slide and move on to the next steps, because before we disband for the evening, I would like for the board, I'm going to ask for a motion that if you're comfortable with the changes that we've talked about today, that you direct staff to go ahead and get the final draft in hands for the May 17th Planning Board special called meeting and for your work session on May 18th, and that you set a public hearing for June 1st. That way we can get this adopted by July 1.
Yeah, so you need a motion to set the public hearing for May 18th.
No, we need a motion to set the public hearing for June 1st.
Okay, so move.
I second.
Okay, you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I got kicked off there for a minute. So I hear a motion from Commissioner Jack Wilson and a second from Commissioner Melling. I think we still have to do a roll call vote, being we're virtual. Am I correct?
I just have a quick question. After we do this roll call, I do have a question about cluster subdivision. So we'll do this first and then I can ask my question. And it's a quick question. All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, town board commissioners, if you would respond when I call your name, either an aye vote or a no vote. Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Vilga,
Aye.
Commissioner Sneed,
Aye.
and Mayor Pro Tem Medley.
Aye.
That is a unanimous vote, Mayor, of those that are present.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you had a question, Michelle. You want to ask your question now?
Yes, thank you. So with the cluster subdivision, in the conventional with the no open space and the cluster, you said that's a choice still, right?
Yes,
ma'am.
that is not.
That's a choice for the developer.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, and then because I know there are a lot of questions during a planning board meeting. So with that added on to the fact that there is a possibility that the space that is basically protected during the cluster subdivision can be built upon? Did I understand that correctly?
There's actually, this is Kelly, I apologize. There's actually a requirement for a recording of a conservation easement or some sort of easement, so that it's very much understood that, those units have been, we'll say, shifted from from the entire site to a portion of the site. And that would also be as part of your approval process.
So, but it doesn't stop somebody coming in to ask to have that released so that they can continue to build.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit?
I said, just with that conservation, what do you say?
A conservation easement?
Okay, so with that easement, it doesn't stop someone from coming and saying, well, can that be removed because we want to add to this subdivision?
They would have to go back through a full public process, and I will definitely defer to the legal counsel as far as removal of the easement off of that property.
Two possibilities. With the conservation easement, you're going to have a grantee. You're going to have the recipient of that easement being an entity that is a third party. It's not going to be the HOA or something along those lines. So it would require the property owner developer as well as the tax advantaged entity to all come back to the town. And then the town would have to agree in its legislative policy judgment to make that change. So it is difficult to see that as a likely path. I'm not aware of the Triangle Land Conservancy ever coming back and saying, hey, we'd like to develop the rest of our land for houses. They've never done that. The other approach, which is more common for a conservation subdivision, is that all of the areas that are not being developed are designated as open space and therefore are required, and there's no available land to build on as the LDO is written right now. So it's the required open space for that subdivision, and the final plat that would be recorded would note that as such, and those are not developable sites.
Okay, I like your second choice better, because I think it's I'm sorry to say it this way, but I think when you set something up like this, and this is how it's supposed to be, for somebody to circle back around, it really wastes the board's time if this was the plan. But I'm probably being harsh in saying that, because there could be an emergency why they're coming forward. But just to alleviate some of that, stop trying to come back on something that this is not set up that way, so that we can move on. This board and future boards can move on to other matters at hand. So that's why I was.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. And Commissioner, just to clarify, this is not intended to be a holding zone or kind of an interim step.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, we only have one that's being built today, and that's here on near West Young Street, and probably most of them, if not all of them, be associated with watershed, which means that like David said, it's designated as open area, undevelopable area because it's in the watershed, and you can't develop but so much density in the watershed. The one that we have going on today is in the watershed, and it's hard to develop with sewer, and it's hard to develop with sewer and water in the watershed unless you cluster, really, because it's just so spread out with trying to put lines in and stuff. So I think that's where we will use it mostly, is our areas that is in the ETJ and the watershed.
Thank you. I'm done. No more
So I have a
questions.
question. I have a question regarding it's right now it's in our UDO. It's R3. This came up last night versus what we're going to be putting in our new LDO. Last night we had something come up that we set up our R3 for a certain acreage minimum for townhomes, and the property in question came in under the acreage, so therefore they could build entire set of townhomes.
I think we set it up as a maximum.
Yeah,
it was 15 acres maximum you could build.
Well, my problem with that is I feel like I would rather see a percentage on that instead of that, but at the same time I don't want to mess up anything that comes. So if something comes in and it's high density and it's right in the middle of downtown, I don't want to say you can only have 75% townhomes and you have to build single family with the rest, because that wouldn't make any sense. But if it's out in another area where we don't want it to be 100% townhomes, how do we address that?
I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Kelly, because Kelly, James, and I have had some emails back and forth today on this as well, knowing our conversations last night. So I've also had discussion with Jason, his third day. He's had a busy week. So firstly, what we've done is with getting rid of the RPUDs and moving over to mixed use developments, what we've done with the mixed use, the town center, the activity center, the neighborhood center, we have built in some percentages in those mixed use areas, not only of when you can develop the residential and when you have to start the commercial, but also how much residential versus commercial you can have. So how that is separated out. So we can go back, and Jason and I had discussed this earlier today about a percentage rather than doing a 15-acre cap, because the original R3 that we had on the books before we had this text amendment was a 20-acre cap for the entire development. What we've done as that text amendment that went through recently for the R3, we removed the 20-acre overall cap and put a 15-acre on townhome and multifamily with any size development coming in. And what we can do is, moving forward with any size development coming in for high density, we have a certain percentage, whether it's a quarter or a third or however you want for that high density to be those townhomes. So we can look at that as well. What we can do right now, this is probably going to be a conversation that needs to be a little bit longer than the next 7 minutes. So what we can do right now is move forward with what we have proposed as part of the comprehensive plan alignment with the LDO, where we have the medium density and the high density separations, and we have the allowable uses based on what is in the comprehensive plan. And when we go through the update for the comprehensive plan, we can make sure that the LDO matches what we want in the comprehensive plan. That way our future land use area of where we want those medium densities, where we want that those town centers, those activity centers to be, neighborhood centers, and then those those areas where we want designated either the high density or the medium density to look at that map again. We had looked at that map originally. I think 2 workshops ago, maybe 3 workshops, when we had a workshop on the R3, and it was while Danny was still here, and we ended up talking about the comprehensive land use plan and how we need to see more commercial in that. So we had already dedicated that we were going to be looking at that in the future. So this is something that would probably be married together sometime after the July 1 timeframe. But what we've got right now is consistent with the comprehensive plan for the town center, the neighborhood center, the activity centers, and keeping those percentage points kind of similar to what we've got now for the RPUD, since we use the mixed use instead of the RPUD to get that distribution right. And if I've misspoken, I'll let Kelly correct me, but and James can chime in, but that is where we were headed with this. And then since this is going to be a longer discussion, we'll pick this back up after July 1, because we may want to involve more of the public as we go forward and what they would like to see in their areas.
So Julie, just to do a listening check here, if we don't fix it now, when will we do the comprehensive relook? How long, what's the horizon for that?
The comprehensive plan has to be updated by 2023. So we've got seed money that you just approved last night to start looking at what we need to do, how we need to go out for RFQ and RFP. That's one of Jason's things. And I think Kelly is getting ready to chime in here as well, Mr. Arnold.
I just want to say it doesn't have to be done. That's not a mandate or anything. Best practices indicate you should do it at a regular period. So anyway, just want to clarify that.
You're saying it doesn't have to be what?
Done.
Oh, done.
Best practices, there's not a mandated time. Best practices indicate you should always come back. You should always visit your comp plan as needed and amend as needed.
Yeah,
you should always do refreshment of it every 5 years or so.
Yes, that's
160D.
Yeah, 160D suggests rather heavily. I don't think it is mandated in 160D, but it is suggested in 160D that you update your comprehensive plan every 5 years.
That's best practices. I agree.
So we would have to struggle with where we're at today for a period of time.
No, what we've got on the books right now, moving forward for the LDO, is those mixed use centers that what we've heard from the board so far on this mixed use, we've incorporated. But this would be something we can look at as soon as July 1 comes around and have those larger discussions.
No, I think what I saw the board struggling with last night, and I think is what Paul mentioned just a few minutes ago, is these little small pocket townhomes that are popping up everywhere.
And medium
it's not the mixed use. Am I wrong about that, board? I mean,
oh, you're correct. You're very much on point with that, Ronnie. And to wait until July, this is an issue that I think we need to tackle before July.
I agree.
Not wait. And I'm not speaking on behalf of Commissioner Sutton, but that was causing a lot of angst for her, as it was for the rest of us, but she was more verbal about it. And I totally agree with that. But I don't feel that we should wait and wrestle with this until July.
Well, Michelle, I'm going to just step in there and not say anything, quite
That's
frankly.
fine. No, that's fine.
But I do think that we can take an issue at a time approach also as we amend the comp plan. So this obviously is of interest to the board. We need to stay focused on the LDO. Yeah. Michelle, we're not going to have any time between now and July 1 on this topic, but there are going to be topics like this that probably after July 1, and I think this is one staff could probably lead and get worked through. And we don't have to go out and hire a consultant unless Kelly has some money left over on his contract and wants to help us. But I think we can start wrestling with it and working through it. I think it's been conveyed to me a sense of urgency. Doesn't have to go back, and I don't think I could be stand corrected as soon as I get done saying something, but I don't think it's one of those you have to do the whole comp plan amendment. You could do it topic by topic, and this is the topic that
Yes.
you all have.
I get what you're saying. I'm not suggesting that, but I know that you
Right.
want them to basically reflect each other. So, but I wasn't really saying that, but I just, when you say we can wait until July 1st, I guess my question is, are you saying we will not discuss it until July 1st?
What I'm saying is it will not be in the final draft of this LDO that is going to go out to the public for May 12th. In order to have something on the books for July 1, we have to have the entire text for the LDO written and ready and available to the public May 12th.
Okay.
Between now and May 12th, this is not going to get resolved and give us enough time to write a text amendment to fix the issue. So this will be something that we can continue to discussion and handle as our first text amendment after July 1. However, in the meantime, what we have on the books is consistent with the comprehensive plan so that we have something that will get us through while we're figuring out what it is exactly we want to do next. And then we can update the LDO and the comprehensive plan amendments at the same time. And when I say amendments, I'm not meaning an overhaul of, the comprehensive update for all of it, but for the specific part of the R3 and the townhome situation that we started.
And I do want to put in perspective, because it's a pretty big issue, because I just want to kind of frame based upon what I've heard, frame the issue. You would need to have some community input on this. Mm-hmm. And if you make the modification as you have generally kind of started discussing, it will need a vetting out process.
Well,
Okay.
Kelly,
I just didn't realize how big of a deal it would be to get to the point that I'm talking about. But I understand, so thank you both.
Kelly, have you not seen the community input for the last probably 18 months or so?
Well, I'm saying because here's your deal, that you're going to be amending a comp plan that will have a public input hearing minimally.
Well, we're hearing it constantly,
Yeah.
I understand. One of these things. I mean, I feel like I've had enough emails and community input already, but
the more important thing is you are making modifications to the comp plan that affects landowners, right? Am I speaking out of line, Julie? Is that?
No, you're not. No.
So I'm saying that's the perspective you need to consider, is there will be that feedback from those who in a comp plan now has that as a possible use.
At the risk of the staff putting a hit out on me, let me double back on the minimum.
Dave, you're breaking up. You're
issue.
breaking up. I just.
I hear you.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So let's remember that what we're talking about here is entirely policy. This is entirely within your realm of discretion. It is not something that is led by staff. The board decides if this is the top priority. And if the board wants to set everything else aside and just take on this topic, the staff has to march to that tune. With regard to the comp plan, there's no legal requirement that the entire comp plan be addressed before you can amend a portion of it. And it is also true that the comp plan itself does not establish any rights per se all by itself to any property owner. It's a guide for the zoning ordinance, which is truly the law that sets the rights. So if that all makes sense, think about that with regard to the applications that you have received. Every case that you get that is an annexation case or a conditional zoning case is purely a policy decision. If it does not align with the board's policy vision, then the answer to that petition may very well be no. It does not have to be yes, just because the ordinance or the comp plan envisions it. And I'll stop there.
That work guidance, and so we'll be ready to address it whenever the board wants to. And I know that you want to get going on it.
Yeah, I think the urgency is these things in the pipeline. I mean, it's more. I think it's more than this one that we saw last night. It's more of them in the pipeline.
And Mr. Mayor, on the other hand, with regard to those items, if they're in the pipeline, they may have already established a right to proceed under the law as it is now. And so you will need to face that under the permit choice that they have made. But again, they don't necessarily have any right for you to support their idea. They just have a right to have their hearing heard under that law.
Right. Yep. And I think what we're seeing here, Kelly, there's a lot of small pieces of property that used to be developers have to get together and get 3 or 4 landowners, and we've seen in the past come together and buy a nice little piece to put a development there. But now they can use this townhome thing and put these little, a little small piece of land, put a lot of density, make a lot of money off of it. So it's a way to do that. And I think the folks that's living around those is getting upset over it, but that's just what I'm seeing. And I know we need public input, but I feel like my inbox has been blowing up for the last 8 months.
Right. I don't want to even contest that. I'm not arguing that. I'm just talking about a typical process. You would have some policy decision that you would have a vetting, they call it a vetting, public process, where there's an opportunity for people to give comment. Yeah. But it's totally your call how you do it.
And I have to confess this, that I think most of our communities surrounding us has not addressed the problem. I mean, they allow it, and they're not addressing it. It's whether it sounds like this board wants to address it, but I'm not sure. But most of these other towns did not, and there is happening all the time. I know, and I'm not going to mention name. I know one mayor told me recently that they're not getting any single family homes anymore. All of them are townhomes.
I agree. We need to get ahead of it.
Because it's a double-edged thing, and and Jackie knows this well too. We know when we look for our park property and stuff. Most of the big, nice, large pieces are gone now, and there's not a lot of large pieces to put a nice big subdivision on anymore. It's getting less and less able to find those, and these little 5, 6, 10 acre things, they're trying to figure out how to make the most money off of them, and that's kind of what we face. And they end up.
Would you be amenable, Mayor and Board, for Julie, Kelly, and Jason put together a proposal that we could talk about on the May 18th meeting on how we would envision we could approach this and proceed?
I would, yes, I would like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like a great idea.
Okay. So Jason, Julie, we will develop a kind of a white paper on summarizing the issue, make sure we got it captured, and then we'll put together our idea of the process. I'm going to just say process, for lack of a better term, of moving forward on a board evaluation of a policy change modification.
Yep.
Legislative modification, and then with a timeline, and we can come to terms on that, and then let us go.
And also maybe you guys look at one old thing, and I think we may have it wrong. I think we may have did it backwards. Is as Paul was saying, the biggest townhome community you can do is 15 acres, and that may be backwards. I know you can't do much with 15 acres other than just pack them in. You can't have any amenities, anything like that. And I don't know, maybe we do have that wrong. because that, it seemed like it's what we're seeing a lot. And I know one of the commissioners said that one of the things that came up was, it was about a 17 acre plot, and they trimmed 2 off so they could get it under the thing for 15. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of what I heard. So, I don't know if we got that right or not. I really don't. I'm kind of confused on whether we got that right when we made it. I think it was 20 and reduced at 15, didn't we? I think.
Yes.
So I don't know if we got that right or not.
Yeah, I think we need to be percentages in certain cases, but there's going to be different cases with that.
Remember, land use is an art and not necessarily a science. Oh,
right.
That's the town manager saying that, not a planner. But and there's always ways of folks in the business figuring out ways to get around. There are better ways of trying to maximize their use. So
Don't sell yourself short, Kelly. You're a pretty darn good planner.
Okay, so if you're amenable to that, we'll have that item up for schedule on the May 18th meeting. Also, just a quick review of our proposed white paper on how to proceed on this topic. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, that's all we had today. So it's back to your show. Thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you, Julie. Very good job again.
Excellent.
Very prepared. Yeah, excellent. All of you. All
I
of you
had
did
a
good
lot of
job.
help with our consultants. So James and Kelly, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I sent them a mini panic email this morning and said, I'm having a small panic attack, help me out. And so they have been great. So thank you so much.
Yep. They have. Yeah, I think you're right, James and Kelly, both of you. Really appreciate it. I know y'all put a lot of time and effort in this, and I think we are getting in short rows, getting down towards the end, and appreciate all the work that everybody's put into it. Thank you, Planning Board. I know y'all put a lot more time in it than we did, and you guys done a tremendous job of sticking with us on this and helping us with that, and appreciate all you guys did too, and the staff. I know it's overworked y'all for a while, but I think we are getting to the end here, and kind of appreciate everything everybody's doing. So with that, I end it. We're a little bit running a little bit late, but we've got a lot covered, and I think we can probably say we're a little bit closer to checking this off. So thanks very much. And with that, I'll end this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.